The flames licked across the horizon like the open jaws of a beast, and through them walked a single man. His armor was cracked, scorched black by plasma burns, his visor shattered so one eye caught the firelight, while the other remained cold, gray, and human. His name was Captain Elias Ward of the 77th Terran Drop Corps, though to the rest of the galaxy, he would soon become something far less human, far more myth. He had been deployed on Virel 9, a world the Keth Dominion had burned down to bedrock. The Terran fleet had been routed, their command ships shattered in orbit, and their soldiers scattered across a wasteland of molten glass and ash. Every report said the same thing: no survivors. But Elias was still walking, and with every step, the fire seemed to bend away from him. He had been left behind during the evacuation. His shuttle had been hit by a plasma round, and he'd crashed deep within the Keth lines. His comms were dead, his oxygen filters failing, but his will, his human will, remained iron. He wasn't walking to survive. He was walking to kill. Somewhere beneath the volcanic skyline, the Keth command nexus pulsed with alien energy, a vast living citadel made of bone and metal, where the Keth Queen herself directed the slaughter of human worlds. Elias had seen her orders replayed in intercepted transmissions before the fall. Cleanse the apes. Leave none breathing. Earth must not rise again. So he'd made himself a promise when the flames took his battalion. He would show her how humans died, and he would make her remember it. The battlefield was silent except for the distant groans of twisted machinery cooling in the heat. Elias scavenged as he walked. An alien rifle here, a canister of oxygen from a dead Terran trooper there. He limped, favoring his left leg, plasma burns spiderwebbed across his armor. The HUD flickered in and out, displaying ghost readings of dead allies. He passed the charred remains of a mech suit, its pilot still fused inside, hands locked around the control grips in death. Elias paused, pressing one gauntleted hand to the machine's blackened chest plate. "You held the line," he muttered. "I'll finish it." Then he kept walking. He moved like a specter through the ruined landscape, using the smoke and ash as cover. The Keth patrols he encountered didn't live long enough to call for help. Their sleek, insectoid forms moved with mechanical precision, but they had no instinct for terror. Not yet, Elias taught them. He learned the alien rifle quickly. Its bioluminescent grip pulsated when charged, the plasma bolts hissing through the smoke with unearthly light. He shot clean, controlled bursts, conserving energy cells, every kill a silent punctuation mark in the dark. When one patrol went missing, the others came searching. They found only corpses, some burnt, some crushed under fallen debris, one hanging upside down from a twisted beam with its own weapon jammed through its thorax. The humans called it war. The Keth would come to call it haunting. By the third day, Elias had stopped counting how many he'd killed. Hunger gnawed at him, exhaustion clawed his body, but he kept pushing forward, navigating by instinct toward the energy signature that marked the Queen's fortress. His mind wandered to Earth. Green hills, oceans that shimmered under sunlight, the laughter of children in cities that no longer existed. The Keth had bombarded them from orbit before the defense fleets could regroup. Billions had died, and the galaxy had watched. None of the so-called civilized races had lifted a hand to help. Humanity was a death world species, they'd said. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. Let them burn. Elias smiled bitterly as he trudged on through the ash. Let them see what their monsters can do. At dusk, he reached the outer perimeter of the alien citadel. It was a grotesque marvel, an enormous structure that seemed to breathe, its walls alive with veins of glowing ichor. Great pylons of black bone rose like the ribs of some god-sized corpse. Keth soldiers moved in organized patrols, their armor glimmering like oil, their alien eyes sweeping the horizon. Elias crouched behind a ridge of slag, surveying. His ammo was half spent, his armor barely functioning, but he didn't hesitate. He'd already died the moment the fleet left orbit. This was just what came after. He waited until nightfall. The Keth didn't sleep, but their sensor cycles dimmed every few hours, an organic rhythm built into their hive structure. Elias used that window. He slipped through the shadows, moving silent and deliberate. The rifle hummed low against his chest. A lone sentry passed by him, its long spear crackling with energy. Elias stepped forward, one arm snaking around its throat, twisting hard. The alien spasmed once, then went limp. He dragged the corpse into the shadows and stripped its biocore, small crystal-like organs that powered their weapons and armor. He pocketed two and kept moving. As he crept deeper into the Citadel grounds, a strange sound began echoing through the structure. A low, rhythmic pulse that resonated through the air. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. The Citadel was alive. The Keth didn't build. They grew. Elias felt the ground pulse under his boots, faintly in sync with his heartbeat. He gritted his teeth. "You built yourself a goddamn monster," he whispered. "Let's see if it bleeds." He reached the inner gate, a massive archway of black stone, guarded by 4 elites in shimmering armor. They stood perfectly still, their weapons planted in the ground like banners. Elias had no chance in a direct fight, but direct fights were for soldiers. He was beyond that now. He rigged 2 plasma cells from scavenged rifles into a makeshift explosive charge, wedging it between the foundation supports of the gate. Then he crawled up into the ridge above the entrance and waited. Minutes dragged into hours until a transport caravan approached, a cluster of glowing pods carried by hovering drones. The guards opened formation. That was his moment. He triggered the detonator. The explosion ripped through the night like thunder. The gate buckled inward, fire gushing out like blood from a wound. Keth soldiers screamed in their insectoid tongue, their formation scattering. Elias dropped into the chaos, firing controlled bursts moving fast and close. One elite turned toward him, blade unsheathed in a flash of blue fire. Elias ducked under the swing, jammed the rifle's muzzle under its chin, and fired. The alien's head burst in a flash of molten light. The others fell seconds later. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood alone again, helmet half melted, his breathing ragged but alive. Always alive. He limped through the ruined gate into the Citadel's heart. The corridors twisted like arteries, lined with living walls that pulsed and whispered. Alien glyphs glowed faintly on the surface, their meanings lost to human understanding. Elias ignored them. He followed the pulse. The deeper he went, the louder it grew until it was like a heartbeat surrounding him. At last, he reached the core chamber, a vast circular hall filled with suspended cocoons, each holding sleeping Keth larvae, thousands of them. At the center rose a colossal throne of bone and crystal, and upon it sat the Keth Queen. She was beautiful in a horrifying way, tall, serpentine, her carapace glimmering like liquid glass. A crown of living light crowned her skull. When she turned her gaze upon him, the temperature seemed to drop. "A human," she said, her voice a chorus of tones that reverberated through his bones. "You are alone." Elias leveled his rifle at her. "That's all it takes." She laughed then, a sound like breaking glass and thunder. "You bleed, little creature. You suffer. You die. What could you possibly teach me?" He smiled behind his cracked visor, blood dripping from his chin. "How to be afraid." And then he pulled the trigger. The rifle's blast illuminated the chamber in a flash of white fire, the plasma bolt striking the alien queen's chest and exploding in a burst of liquid light. The impact threw her back against her throne, shards of glowing carapace flying in all directions. But before Elias could fire again, something slammed into him with inhuman force, sending him crashing into the wall. His armor screeched as biometal claws dug into his chest plate. He reacted on instinct, twisting his wrist to jam a combat knife upward. The blade sank deep into the creature's neck. It spasmed, hissed, and went limp. He kicked it off and rolled to his feet, gasping through smoke and blood. The queen rose again, her wound already knitting together, her eyes burning with alien fury. "You think yourself a god, little ape," she hissed, her voice trembling with both rage and awe. "But you are only meat that forgot its place." Elias's laughter was dry and broken. "If I'm meat," he said, leveling his rifle again, "then you're dinner." He fired, diving sideways as plasma streaked through the air. The alien queen moved with terrifying grace, her form almost blurring as she dodged, her tail cracking against the floor, with enough force to shatter the bone-grown pillars. The cocoon walls rippled with movement, as dormant Keth larvae began to stir, their psychic wails flooding the room with a chorus of alien noise. Elias dropped behind a fallen support beam, checking the readout on his rifle. Power cells 2%. Not enough to finish this. He gritted his teeth, reloaded with the last scavenged core he had, and prepared to move. But before he could, her voice came again. Closer this time, almost whispering in his ear. "Do you know why your kind loses?" she asked, her tone calm now, almost pitying. "You break. You burn. You care. We do not. That is why your species is dying." Elias felt the vibrations through the floor as she circled him. The air thickened with pheromonal mist, an alien tactic meant to disorient prey. But Elias was no prey. He reached to his belt and triggered a small device, a flare grenade. It went off with a blinding flash, bathing the chamber in red light. The queen shrieked, recoiling as the flare disrupted her biovision. Elias surged forward, sliding under her tail, his combat knife flashing again. He slashed across her abdomen, hot black ichor splattering across his armor. The smell was acid and metal. She screamed, spinning with impossible speed, her claws catching his helmet and tearing it half off. Pain blinded him for a second. The world tilted, the edges of his vision fading to white. But pain, for a Deathworlder, was not a weakness. It was fuel. He staggered back, blood running down his face, vision doubled. His knife was gone. His rifle lay several meters away, smoking. The queen loomed over him, her massive frame blotting out the pulsing light above. "I admire your persistence," she said, her voice shaking the air. "But I will take your body, study it, and understand what makes you dangerous. And then, I will unmake your earth, cell by cell." Elias spat blood, smiling through cracked teeth. "You talk too much." He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into her chest. The impact did nothing to her mass, but it caught her off balance long enough for him to grab one of the exposed bioenergy conduits pulsing from the throne. The conduit was alive. He could feel it vibrating under his grip. He ripped it free and jammed it against her wound. The queen shrieked as raw energy arced through her body, fire and light consuming her carapace. Elias held it there until the conduit exploded, throwing them both across the chamber. He hit the ground hard, rolling until he slammed against a pillar. His armor was done, systems failing, oxygen low. But the queen was down, her form smoking, her movements twitching and weak. He dragged himself upright, every joint screaming. "Not so immortal now," he muttered. He stumbled toward her, pulling his last weapon from his belt. A Terran-made fusion charge, small but powerful enough to level a starship bay. He thumbed the activation switch. "This one's for Earth." But as he reached her, she moved again. Her claws pierced his side, driving through armor and flesh in a burst of pain so sharp he couldn't even scream. The device fell from his grasp, skittering across the floor. The queen's eyes flared with triumph as she lifted him. "Even in death you serve me," she whispered. "Your pain will teach us how to kill your kind faster." Elias met her gaze, his face pale but calm. "Then you still don't get it," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "We don't die fast." With his free hand, he jammed a plasma cell straight into her wound and squeezed. The cell ruptured, releasing a surge of white-hot energy that tore through her abdomen. The explosion hurled him back once again. But this time, the queen didn't rise. She screamed, a sound that echoed across the entire citadel, as cracks of light spread through her body like veins of molten glass. The chamber shook. The living walls convulsed. The larvae shrieked in unison. Elias forced himself onto his knees, grabbed the fallen fusion charge, and stared at her one last time. "You wanted to learn fear," he rasped, pressing the device's timer. "Lesson starts now." He slammed his fist down on the trigger and dropped the charge beside her throne. Alarms blared immediately. The Citadel's heart began to pulse erratically, lights strobing across the organic walls. He turned and staggered toward the exit, each step like lifting stone. His comms crackled faintly for the first time in days, an old emergency channel coming online. "This is Command Unit 7. Any Terran forces reading. Repeat. Unknown signal detected from Virel 9. Elias almost laughed. "You're late," he muttered. He didn't answer, just kept walking as the floor buckled beneath him. Behind him, the Queen's dying roar rose one last time. Then everything went white. The explosion consumed the entire fortress, the blast visible even from orbit. The Keth fleet circling above faltered as their command link vanished. The psychic shockwave of the Queen's death rippled through their hive networks, disrupting coordination and sending them into chaos. And out of that chaos, human reinforcements arrived. The Terran fleet, thought lost, had regrouped under Admiral Corta's orders. When they saw the blast, they didn't ask questions. They descended like wolves. Hours later, when the smoke finally cleared, the battlefield was silent again. The citadel was gone, reduced to glass and ash. Search drones combed the surface, picking through debris and ruins, searching for signs of the impossible. Survivors. Most found nothing. But one drone, operating near the edge of the crater, detected movement. Buried under layers of rubble and burned alien tissue was a man. Armor destroyed, body broken, but somehow breathing. They pulled him out carefully. When the medics saw his dog tags, silence fell. "Captain Elias Ward," one whispered. "But he was declared KIA days ago." The Admiral herself arrived minutes later, her uniform still scorched from the battle. She looked down at the ruined man before her, his face half hidden behind dried blood and soot. His pulse was faint, his body a ruin of burns and shattered bone. But when she leaned closer, his lips moved. "Did we win?" She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "We did, Captain." "You did." He tried to smile back, but darkness took him before he could. The medics worked for hours to stabilize him, their reports grim. Yet somehow, against every medical expectation, he lived. Days later, as the fleet departed Virel 9, the soldiers whispered his name like a prayer. They said he'd walked alone into the fire and came back with the galaxy trembling. They said no human could have survived what he did, that perhaps he wasn't fully human anymore. In the Keth records, those that survived the event was known as the Death Flare. Entire fleets fell apart after it, their command lines broken, their hive minds in disarray. The Keth who escaped began to spread stories through the stars of a creature of flame and blood that had killed their queen. They said he was still out there, wandering the burning worlds, a harbinger of extinction. To humans, he was a hero. To the galaxy, a ghost. To the Keth, a nightmare that walked in daylight. And somewhere, in a recovery chamber aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Elias Ward opened his eyes for the first time since the blast. The lights were too bright, the air too clean. Machines hummed softly around him. His vision cleared, and he saw the Admiral standing nearby. "Welcome back," she said quietly. "You've been out a long time." Elias swallowed, his throat raw. "Did the fire reach them?" "Every last one," she said. He nodded weakly, staring out the viewport beyond her, where the scarred world of Virel 9 turned slowly in the light of a distant sun. "Then it was worth it," he murmured. And for the first time in months, he let himself sleep. Not as a soldier, not as a killer, but as a man who had finally done what needed to be done. But even as he slept, far across the galaxy something stirred. The psychic echo of the Queen's death had not simply vanished. It had moved. A signal, faint but deliberate, pulsed across deep space, toward the dark heart of the Keth Dominion. They had lost their queen, but they had not forgotten her killer. And the war for the galaxy was far from over. The medics said he should have died 10 times over. Every nerve in Elias Ward's body had been cooked by radiation, his lungs scarred from inhaling superheated air, his bones fractured in more places than they could count. But when he finally woke for good, weeks later, the first thing he did was sit up. Not slowly, not weakly, like a man coming out of a bad dream and realizing it wasn't over yet. The medical staff rushed to stop him, alarms blaring as bioscanners tried to read his vitals. But Elias ignored them. "Where's the fleet?" he rasped, voice little more than gravel. "Where are we?" The doctor tried to calm him, stammering something about rest and recovery. But Elias's eyes cut through him like glass. "The war," he said, forcing each word out. "Did we finish it?" The door slid open before anyone could answer. Admiral Corta entered, her expression carved from stone. "No, Captain," she said quietly. "We finished one battle. The war is only beginning." She dismissed the medics and stood at the foot of his bed, studying him in silence. The room's lights reflected faintly off her cybernetic eye, a common augmentation after decades of service. "You blew their queen to hell, and with her most of the Keth fleet's coordination," she said. "We've retaken 3 colonies in the chaos that followed." "But the Keth aren't dead. They're adapting." Elias frowned. "Adapting how?" She handed him a datapad. The hollow image flickered to life, displaying the aftermath of the death flare. Entire sectors of Keth space were dark. No transmissions, no movement. But on the fringes of that silence, new signals had appeared. Larger, stranger. "They're reforming under something new," she continued. "We don't know what. The scientists think the psychic resonance from the Queen's death was absorbed by another hive. A stronger one." Elias stared at the display for a long moment. "Then it worked," he said. "We hurt them bad enough they had to evolve." The Admiral gave him a look somewhere between admiration and fear. "You talk like that's a victory." "It is," Elias said simply. "The galaxy's been treating us like pests for too long. Now they know we bite." Within a month he was walking again. Barely, but walking. The medics called it impossible, his muscles regenerating faster than normal human biology allowed. They didn't know about the alien fragments embedded in his body, the bioconduits from the Queen's citadel that had fused with his bloodstream during the explosion. The human immune system should have rejected them, but somehow Elias's didn't. His cells adapted, binding to the alien matter as though it belonged there. He felt it sometimes, a hum under his skin, a faint vibration in his bones when he slept. He didn't tell the doctors. Some instincts were too old to die, and this one whispered to him, "Don't let them study you." Not yet. He returned to duty sooner than anyone expected. Officially, he was reassigned as a field advisor. Unofficially, he was a ghost. No longer listed on the public roster, no official command, just a quiet directive from the Admiral herself. Go where they're weakest. Do what you do best. That meant he was back in the fire, alone, just the way he liked it. The Terran Confederacy had learned from its near extinction. Their armies were smaller now, leaner, harder. Every human soldier who'd survived the First War was something the galaxy hadn't seen before. A death worlder forged by apocalypse. Elias's first mission came from the Outer Rim, a distress call from a mining colony on Mara 4, deep in disputed Keth space. The fleet couldn't spare ships, but Elias didn't need an army. They dropped him in stealth orbit aboard a single-pilot shuttle. The landing was rough. The planet's atmosphere was thick with storms that glowed faintly blue, ionized by constant electrical discharge. When he stepped out, the world was eerily quiet. The mining colony lay in ruins, prefabs melted and twisted into skeletal remains. He moved through the wreckage, scanning for life signs. There were none, at least none human. He found the first Keth corpse half buried under debris, its exoskeleton fractured, its eyes still glowing faintly. But something was wrong. Its carapace bore strange markings, scars that weren't battle wounds but deliberate carvings, symbols burned into its flesh. When he knelt to inspect them, his visor sensors detected faint psionic residue. The patterns weren't random. They pulsed, faintly alive. Elias's jaw tightened. "You're changing again," he muttered. "Learning faster." He moved deeper into the colony, following the trail of destruction until he reached the central reactor shaft. The power core was still active, humming deep underground. But the entire facility around it had been gutted, as though the aliens had torn through every wall to reach something inside. And then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not the mechanical hum of machines, not the rustle of ash or wind. It was a heartbeat. Slow, heavy, coming from below. He descended through the broken maintenance tunnels, rifle ready. The deeper he went, the stronger the pulse became, until it felt like the ground itself was breathing. His suit sensors began to flicker, static crawling across his HUD. At the bottom of the shaft, the tunnel opened into a cavern not on any map. In the center of it stood something that made his blood run cold. A growth of alien biomass fused to the reactor, spreading like a tumor. At its core, encased in translucent resin, was a shape that made his stomach turn. A cocoon. And inside it, something vaguely humanoid. He approached slowly, rifle aimed. As his lights fell across the surface, the cocoon shuddered. The humanoid figure inside opened its eyes. They glowed red. Elias stepped back, weapon steady. "What the hell?" The cocoon cracked. A liquid hiss filled the air as the creature stepped free, covered in viscous black fluid that steamed off its skin. It was tall, almost his height, but its features were unmistakably Terran. Human, yet its veins glowed faintly blue, and its eyes shimmered like the Queen's had. "Identify yourself," Elias barked. No answer. The creature tilted its head, studying him with curious fascination. When it finally spoke, its voice was soft, calm, too calm. "We remember you." Elias's finger twitched on the trigger. "You're not one of us." "No," the creature said, taking a step forward. "But we are because of you. You carried her seed when you left the fire. You gave us life." He fired. Plasma rounds tore through the creature's chest, but instead of falling, it staggered, the wounds closing almost instantly. It raised one hand, and a wave of psychic force slammed into Elias, throwing him against the wall. His armor's shields flickered, overloaded. He rolled, trying to get up, but the creature moved faster than anything human should. Its hand closed around his throat. "You are the bridge," it said, its eyes blazing brighter now. "Through you we become whole. Through you we remember the Queen." Elias grabbed a knife from his thigh sheath and drove it straight into the thing's neck. It screamed, not in pain but rage. He ripped the blade out and swung again, slashing through its face. It stumbled back, ichor spilling down its jaw. "You want to remember her?" Elias growled, pulling a thermal grenade from his belt. "Then join her!" He hurled the grenade at the cocoon behind it. The blast filled the chamber with fire and light, consuming everything. When he climbed out minutes later, limping and burned again, the cavern was gone. Nothing left but molten slag and drifting smoke. He collapsed outside the facility, gasping. His comm crackled to life. "Ward report," came Admiral Corta's voice tense. "Reading massive energy spikes from your position." He wiped blood from his mouth. "I found something," he said hoarsely. "It was human, and it wasn't. The Queen left more than memories behind." There was silence on the line then. "Understood. Exfil now. We'll debrief in orbit." But as he made his way back to the shuttle, Elias knew it wasn't over. He could still feel it. The hum beneath his skin growing stronger, answering something distant. That thing in the cocoon hadn't lied. He had carried something out of that fire on Virel 9. Something alive. Something waiting. That night, as the shuttle lifted off the burning world, Elias stared out the viewport at the endless dark. For the first time he felt a flicker of doubt. Humanity had survived extinction. They had risen from the ashes, broken the galaxy's chains, and made the stars fear their name. But now, he wasn't sure if they'd unleashed something worse than the Keth. Something born of both predator and prey, of man and monster. And deep inside, where the alien fragments in his body pulsed in rhythm with his heart, Elias Ward began to hear a whisper. Soft, familiar, female. "You thought you killed me," it said, "but you only set me free." The ground shook with every step Adrian took as he moved deeper into the alien fortress. The smoke curled in the air, turning everything into a shadowed haze of ruin and glowing embers. The screams had died hours ago, both human and alien, but the silence that followed was heavier than the noise ever was. His armor was cracked, his weapons slagged from overuse, and his left arm hung useless at his side. But he kept walking. He had promised himself he would not stop until the fire itself gave out, or until the galaxy learned what fear really meant. The fortress of the Vorth Dominion was once a monument to their supremacy, a cathedral of metal and arrogance. It was built to inspire terror in the weak species of the stars. Now it was a grave. The corridors were painted in ash and blood, the walls cracked by concussive blasts that had melted steel like wax. Adrian's footsteps echoed softly, one man's rhythm against the heartbeat of a dying world. His visor flickered, projecting ghost readings, dead signals of fallen allies. His comms were long gone. He had smashed it himself to keep the silence intact. This war was no longer about strategy or command. It was about what one human could do when everything else was stripped away. He moved past the remains of alien machinery, some of it still twitching with failing power. Limbs of metal creatures sparked on the floor, their silver frames dented and broken. He had fought them all night. Alone. Every strike, every bullet, every explosion had come with a price. He had seen his reflection in the alien metal once, between battles, his face blackened with soot, eyes glowing faintly from the light of his cracked HUD. He didn't recognize that man anymore. The boy who had joined the Terran Vanguard 5 years ago had died in the mud on Eris 9. What walked now was something else, something born from pain, steel, and the endless fire of defiance. As he stepped into the throne hall, the last of the fortress defenses activated. The towering automated cannons rose from the ground, their targeting arrays glowing red. He didn't hesitate. He moved like the fire itself, rolling, diving, firing bursts from the half-broken rifle in his right hand. The air burned as plasma bolts tore through it. One hit him square in the chest, spinning him back, armor screaming as it absorbed the worst of the blast. He gasped and forced himself forward, firing again. His shots weren't aimed, they were instinct. He didn't need precision anymore. He needed fury. A lucky round hit a fuel line. The explosion that followed shattered the far end of the hall, raining molten metal like hail. The cannons went silent, smoking, ruined. He coughed, tasting blood, and leaned on the butt of his rifle. His breath was ragged. He could feel the warmth of blood under his armor now, seeping from somewhere near his ribs. But he smiled. For the first time in hours, he smiled. "Still standing," he muttered. The voice that answered him was not human. It slithered through the hall from the shadows beyond the throne, deep, melodic, and filled with contempt. "You are far from home, human." The Queen of the Vorth stepped forward. She was taller than any soldier he had faced, draped in armor that seemed woven from glass and light. Her face was sharp and alien, her eyes glowing with cold intelligence. "Your world burns. Your fleets are dust. Why do you keep fighting?" Adrian lifted his head, eyes like burning coals behind the cracked visor. "Because we're too damn stubborn to die." The Queen tilted her head, studying him as if he were a strange animal that refused to fall. "You think yourself invincible, yet your species crawls from a death world of mud and storms, barbaric, primitive. You should have perished long before reaching the stars." Adrian laughed softly, a sound more painful than amused. "Yeah, they keep telling us that. Doesn't ever seem to work out for them." He raised his weapon again, but the Queen lifted one hand. The air rippled, and his rifle flew from his grasp, clattering to the ground. "Enough of this," she hissed. "You have destroyed my city, murdered my legions, desecrated my throne. You will die here, human, nameless and forgotten." Adrian took a step forward. "Then what are you waiting for?" The Queen's claws glowed, energy gathering between them. She struck, and lightning ripped through the air. It slammed into him, sending him crashing to the floor. His armor flared, overloaded, and went dark. He screamed, body writhing, but still his hands clawed at the ground, pushing himself up. The Queen's expression shifted, faint surprise breaking through her mask of calm. He should have been dead. The energy she wielded could vaporize steel. But he rose again, smoke rising from his armor. "You can't," he gasped, forcing the words through blood and pain. "Kill what doesn't quit." She struck again. He fell again. His vision dimmed, blackness clawing at the edges. But still, something deep inside refused to fade. He could see flashes of earth in his mind. Forests burning, oceans storming, people shouting through the noise of battle. He saw faces. His squad mates, his brother, the little girl who had waved at him before he left home. They were all gone now, but their memory burned brighter than the lightning that tore through him. He lunged forward with a broken piece of his rifle, slamming it into the Queen's chest. The shard cut through her armor, dark blue blood spilling onto the floor. she hissed, staggering back. Impossible, she whispered. He grabbed her throat, eyes wild. You wanted to know what fear is? He growled. Look at me. She struggled, clawing at him, but he didn't let go. He didn't even feel the pain anymore. The fire inside him had consumed everything else. They crashed together into the throne, shattering it. Sparks and molten debris rained around them as the fortress groaned, collapsing under its own weight. The queen's power flared again, hurling him back one last time. He hit the ground hard, body refusing to move. The ceiling split open, revealing the burning sky above. He could see the orbiting ships, distant flashes of battle still lighting the heavens. The queen staggered to her feet, clutching her wound, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. You cannot win, she snarled. Adrian laughed, a raw, broken laugh. Already did, he said, pointing weakly to the detonator on his belt. Her eyes widened as she understood too late. For Earth, he whispered, pressing the trigger. The explosion was silent at first, then everything was light. The entire fortress erupted in a column of fire that pierced the sky. From orbit, the Terran survivors saw the blast bloom like a star. Communications flared to life, voices shouting in disbelief as the Dominion's flagship vanished from their scanners. They didn't know who had done it. They only knew one human had gone in, and nothing came out but flame. In the aftermath, the Dominion forces began to retreat. Their command structure fractured, their morale shattered. Rumors spread faster than light that a single human had faced their queen and turned her palace into ash. They called him the Firewalker. Some said he had become one with the flames, walking still through the wreckage of the battlefield, laughing in the smoke. On distant worlds, alien generals whispered his name like a curse. Soldiers who had mocked humanity before now looked to their skies in fear, wondering if the fire would come for them next. The galaxy, for the first time in its long, proud history, felt something it had never known before. Not respect, not curiosity, but raw, primal fear. And on a cold world far from Earth, where the ruins of the Vorth fortress still smoldered, the wind carried a faint echo through the ashes. A human voice, rough and quiet, whispering through the smoke. Still standing. The fire had burned itself out days ago, leaving only the bones of the fortress and the silence of the dead. The air was heavy with the scent of ash and molten glass, and the sky above still carried a faint orange hue from the dust kicked into orbit. For a long time there had been nothing, no movement, no sound, just the endless hush of ruin. Then, under the mountain of scorched debris that had once been the Vorth throne hall, something stirred. A gloved hand, blackened and trembling, pushed through the rubble. The fingers dug into the stone, scraping until they found air. Slowly, painfully, a man pulled himself free. His armor was a shattered ruin, the plating warped and fused to his skin in places. His face was half hidden behind a cracked visor, the light inside flickering like a dying star. But his eyes, those human eyes, still burned. Adrian lived. He crawled until he could no longer feel the weight of the fortress on his back, then rolled onto his side and stared at the sky. For the first time in days, he let himself breathe. Every inhale felt like fire in his chest, but it was still air, and he was still alive. He laughed weakly, though it came out more like a rasp. Guess you'll have to try harder than that, he whispered to the emptiness. The world around him was dead. The Dominion fleet had fled, their ships vanishing into the void, too afraid to finish what they started. He didn't know it yet, but word of his stand had already spread across systems. Entire battalions had deserted upon hearing the tale of the human who walked into fire and came out laughing. But none of that mattered to him now. Adrian had only one thought: get up. Keep moving. He forced himself to stand. His left leg was half dead, and his ribs felt like shattered glass grinding with every motion. He tore a strip of armor from his thigh plate and wrapped it around a deep wound, cinching it tight. Pain was good. It meant he wasn't done yet. The land around him was unrecognizable. What had once been a shining alien metropolis was now a grave of blackened spires and twisted metal. He walked through it like a ghost among tombstones. Everywhere he looked, he saw remnants of the war. Burned banners, melted weapons, half-buried skeletons of both alien and human design. The Dominion had ruled here for centuries, enslaving hundreds of species. Now their empire's capital was nothing but dust. He stumbled into what used to be a garden, a place of strange crystal trees and flowing light. The trees were all shattered now, the crystals melted into shimmering pools. In one of them he saw his reflection. He almost didn't recognize the face staring back. His beard was ragged, his skin blistered, one eye swollen nearly shut. But behind the exhaustion was something more, a spark that hadn't died. He knelt beside the pool, touched the surface, and whispered, "Still standing." Then he looked up at the horizon and saw movement. It was faint, figures in the distance, walking through the ruins. For a moment his instinct screamed enemy. He reached for his pistol, but it was gone, melted to slag during the blast. So he stood still, waiting. The figures drew closer, 6 of them, armored, human. His breath caught. The lead figure waved a hand and shouted through a broken helmet speaker, "Firewalker! Holy hell, you're alive!" Adrian blinked. He hadn't heard that name before, but the way they said it carried weight. The soldiers surrounded him, faces filled with disbelief. "Command thought you were gone," one of them said. "We saw the blast from orbit. No one thought anything could survive that." Adrian gave a crooked grin. "Guess no one told me." They brought him to their dropship, a scarred and battered craft still smoldering from re-entry. As it lifted from the planet's surface, Adrian looked out the window. The world below glowed with embers, the remains of the Dominion's heart. "What now?" one of the soldiers asked quietly. "Now," Adrian said, voice low and firm, "we finish it." The Dominion had been broken, but not destroyed. Their fleets were scattered, their colonies still enslaved. And the galaxy, once mocking, once indifferent, was now watching. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed as a footnote, an anomaly from a cursed world. But the fire that had consumed this place was more than an explosion. It was a message. The journey back to the Terran fleet took days. The medics tried to treat Adrian's wounds, but he refused sedation. He wanted to remember every moment, the pain, the exhaustion, the feeling of rising again. When they finally docked at the flagship Resolve, the crew gathered to see him. Men and women who had fought and bled across countless systems stood in silence as he stepped off the ramp. The Admiral herself, an old woman with silver hair and eyes like sharpened steel, approached him. "You went in alone," she said quietly. "And you came out alive." He shrugged weakly. "Mostly." She studied him for a long time, then smiled. "You gave us something we haven't had in years, soldier. Hope." In the days that followed, the story spread. The Firewalker of Earth, the man who walked into the Dominion stronghold and brought it down alone. His name became legend, but Adrian wanted none of it. He spent his time in silence, repairing his armor, watching the stars from the observation deck. To him, the war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The Dominion would regroup, new threats would rise, and humanity would have to keep fighting. That was what humans did. That was what they were. Weeks later, the fleet arrived at the next front. Reports came in of Dominion warlords rallying their armies in the shadow sectors. The Council of Free Worlds begged for help. They had seen what humans could do, and now they wanted the fire on their side. Adrian stood in the command chamber, surrounded by officers debating strategy. He listened in silence until the noise became unbearable. Then he spoke. "They think we're coming for revenge," he said. "They're wrong. We're coming for peace. Our kind of peace." The room fell silent. He looked out at the star map, the glowing points representing worlds still enslaved, still burning. "We walk into the fire," he said softly, "because no one else will." When the next battle came, he led from the front. His body was still weak, his scars unhealed, but his will was iron. The Dominion forces met them on the world of Carthis, a jungle planet crawling with their war beasts. The humans landed in the middle of a storm, their drop pods slamming into mud and lightning. Adrian was first out, his rifle raised, his voice carrying through the comms. "No mercy," he said. "No retreat." The men followed him like shadows, moving through fire and rain as if born for it. Every explosion lit his figure against the storm, a lone spark defying the darkness. The Dominion broke again. The galaxy began to shift. Planets once under alien rule declared allegiance to Earth. Armies that had once feared the Death Worlders now knelt beside them in awe. Adrian became a symbol, not of power, but of endurance. The alien propaganda machines couldn't twist it, couldn't bury it. There was no fear like the kind that came from knowing your enemy would never stop coming, even when the world itself turned to flame. Years passed. The war changed names and borders, but humanity kept pushing forward. Adrian fought through it all until one day, on a quiet moon far from any front line, he finally laid down his rifle. He watched the sun rise over the alien horizon, the light touching the fields of ash and glass, and he smiled faintly. He knew his time was ending, not from wounds, but from the simple weight of years. He had given everything a man could give. But before he closed his eyes, he whispered the words that had carried him through it all. Still standing. And somewhere out there, in the deep cold of space, the story of the Firewalker continued to spread. It passed through ships and camps, through whispers in alien tongues. They said that when the fire of war burned too bright, when the enemy thought victory was certain, they would hear the sound of boots crunching through ash, and they would remember the man who walked alone into the fire and taught the galaxy what it meant to fear.